Leave the birdsong and the slow, breathing meadows behind. Tonight, we're stepping into the thrumming, heart-pounding center of the Industrial Revolution, a world where time is no longer measured by the sun, but by the relentless clack-hiss of the steam engine and the frantic dance of the spinning jenny. The air here is heavy, tasting of coal dust, hot iron, and the sort of humid grease that seems to coat your very thoughts. You're standing on a floor that vibrates with the energy of 1,000 mechanical hearts, watching as the quiet traditions of the countryside are chewed up and spun into endless miles of cotton. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this, not because of the soot, but because the sheer bone-deep exhaustion of a 14-hour shift would make your modern busy schedule look like a long weekend at a luxury spa. So, before the factory whistle blows again, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you've genuinely enjoyed our little delve into the gears of the past. And do drop your location and local time in the comments. It's a wonderful bit of company to see where in the world you're settling down from tonight. Now, dim the lights, perhaps turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step out onto cobblestones still slick with yesterday's rain, and the air hits you first. It's thick, heavy, and tastes faintly of sulfur and damp wool. Above you, the sky is a bruised shade of charcoal, already bruised further by the plumes of 100 brick chimneys. It's barely 5 in the morning, and the town is awake. Not the gentle, stretching kind of awake you know today, but a mechanical, grinding alertness that vibrates through your boots. You pull your collar up against the chill and start walking toward the mill, because stopping isn't an option, not yet. Not when you're living through the birth of industrial time. Monday through Saturday. That's the rhythm etched into your bones before you even realize it's been carved there. There is no weekend. There's just the grind, the whistle, and the brief, blinking pause for Sunday. And even Sunday isn't really yours. It's borrowed time. But before we get to the quiet, we have to walk through the noise. The early 19th century workweek isn't just long, it's relentless. You're clocking 70 to 80 hours, sometimes more, depending on how hungry the mill owner is for production. The machines don't care about fatigue, and neither do the foremen. Your hands learn to navigate the looms and the spindles by memory, moving on autopilot while your mind drifts somewhere far away from the deafening clatter of iron and wood. You breathe in cotton dust that coats your lungs like fine ash. You feel the vibration of the floorboards humming against your soles, a constant, low-frequency tremor that follows you home, that follows you into your sleep. Ret isn't a concept here. It's a foreign word, something spoken about by clergymen in hushed tones or read in moral tracts that gather dust on a windowsill. Your body knows only motion. You wake to the bell. You work until the bell. You eat cold bread and weak tea in the span of 12 minutes. You work until the bell. And when Saturday evening finally arrives, it doesn't feel like victory. It just feels like a temporary ceasefire. You stumble out into the dusk, your ears still ringing with the phantom rhythm of the machinery, and you try to convince your trembling hands that they belong to a human being, not a cog. The city around you mirrors this exhaustion. Shops close, doors latch, and the streets grow quiet for a few precious hours, but by Sunday night begins to creep in again. Because tomorrow is Monday, and Monday, historically speaking, is where everything falls apart. Mainstream records from Manchester and Leeds show that early factory legislation barely touched the adult male working day. The 1833 Factory Act famously capped child labour hours, but grown men and women simply absorbed the missing production. Employers viewed time as a commodity to be extracted, much like coal from a seam or ore from a pit. There's a pervasive belief among mill managers of the 1820s that a 12-hour day is actually too gentle. They push for 14, sometimes 16, especially when foreign markets suddenly demand more yarn or cloth. You feel that pressure in your shoulders. You feel it in the way your breath shortens by Wednesday. And you feel it most acutely when the weekend rolls around, because by then, your body is running on fumes and cheap gin. Which brings us to the first real crack in the industrial machine. Though the bosses don't see it as a crack, they see it as defiance. By the time Sunday night fades into Monday morning, the workshops are half empty. Not entirely abandoned, but noticeably hollow. Workers show up late, or not at all. nursing what the newspapers of the era politely call morning indisposition. In reality, it's exhaustion pounded by heavy weekend drinking. Alcohol is the only affordable anesthetic available, the only way to drown out the ringing in your ears and the ache in your back. So you drink on Sunday. You drink late into the evening, sometimes with the whole neighborhood, because community is one of the few things the factories haven't managed to mechanize yet. And then Monday arrives. You wake with a pounding head, a dry mouth, and absolutely zero desire to step back into that deafening room. So you stay in bed, or you wander the streets, or you sit by the window and watch the rain. The mill owner calls it laziness, the clergy call it moral decay, the workers call it survival. There's a fascinating fringe piece of workplace culture from this era that rarely makes it into textbooks. Before punch cards existed, foremen used a system called the tally stone to mark absences. But in some northern mills, they actually kept a separate ledger for Monday complaints. Workers would quietly leave small tokens on the supervisor's desk, a chipped button, a smooth river stone, a single copper penny, as a silent plea for leniency. It was an unspoken code. The token meant, I am still here, even if my body isn't. The supervisor would sometimes pocket it and look the other way until Tuesday. It's a strange, quiet rebellion, a tiny act of humanity buried under layers of soot and schedule. Historians still argue whether these tokens were genuine pleas for mercy, or simply early, informal labor strikes in disguise. Some say they reflect a deeply ingrained pre-industrial rhythm of work, still clinging to the modern world. Others believe they were just superstition, like throwing salt over your shoulder before crossing the factory threshold. Either way, it tells you that Monday wasn't just a day on the calendar. It was a fracture in the system. You can almost hear the foreman pacing the empty floorboards, his boots clicking sharply against the wood. He checks the ledger. He looks at the looms. He sighs, pinches the bridge of his nose, and realizes another quarter of the day is slipping away. Productivity dips, quotas stall, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings 9, marking a time when the workshop should have been roaring with life. Instead, it's just the hum of idle belts and the occasional drip of condensation from a leaky steam pipe. The silence feels heavier than the noise. It feels like a threat. And for the first time, the people who own the machines realize they can't simply force time to behave. They have to negotiate with it. But negotiation is a word the 19th century isn't ready for yet. So instead, they watch the empty doorways. They wait. And the city breathes a slow, ragged sigh, unaware that this quiet rebellion is about to spark the most profound shift in how humans experience time itself. You stand at the edge of it all, feeling the weight of 100,000 Mondays pressing against your ribs, knowing that something has to give. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, it begins to. You wake to the sound of a distant church bell, but it's not the gentle chime that calls you to prayer. It's the hollow echo of time slipping away, and your head pounds in rhythm with it. The room smells of stale ale and unwashed linen, and for a moment you forget where you are. Then it hits you. Monday. The word itself feels like a weight on your chest. You roll over, pull the thin blanket up to your chin, and make a decision that feels less like rebellion and more like basic biology. You're not going in, not today, and you're not alone. All around you, in cramped tenements and attic rooms, other workers are making the same choice. The city outside is quieter than it should be for a weekday morning. The usual rush of boots on cobblestones is absent. The factory whistle blows, sharp and insistent, but it echoes through nearly empty streets. This is Saint Monday, and it's not on any calendar, but everyone knows its name. The tradition isn't written down in any rulebook. It's passed along in whispers over pints, in the knowing nods between shift workers, in the way families plan their meagre meals around the expectation that Monday morning will be flexible. You stumble out of your lodging house, blinking in the grey light, and the neighbourhood feels like a shared secret. Doors are ajar. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys at odd hours. Men in worn waistcoats lean against doorframes, sipping tea that's more hot water than leaf, their eyes bloodshot but calm. Women mend clothes on stoops, their movements slow and deliberate, as if resisting the urge to hurry. There's a strange, suspended quality to the air. It's not quite leisure, not quite laziness. It's a collective exhale, a breath held between the grind of Saturday and the inevitable return to the loom on Tuesday. You walk toward the mill, not to enter, but to witness. The great brick building looms ahead, its windows dark in places where machinery should be churning. The gate is open, but the courtyard is nearly deserted. A foreman paces near the entrance, clipboard in hand, his face a mask of frustration. He calls out names, but the only replies are echoes. Mainstream historical accounts from industrial cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and Glasgow consistently reference St. Monday as a widespread informal practice throughout the early to mid-1800s. Court records, newspaper editorials, and factory inspection reports all lament the Monday absenteeism that plagued productivity. Workers weren't just skipping, they were engaging in a form of time reclamation, a way to assert a sliver of control over lives otherwise dictated by the clock and the owner's ledger. The term itself, St. Monday, was used both mockingly by employers and affectionately by labourers, turning a day of absence into a kind of secular feast day. You can almost taste the irony in the air, mixed with the lingering scent of weekend ale. And speaking of ale, that's where the real texture of St. Monday comes from. The weekend drinking wasn't just recreational. It was medicinal, social, and economic all at once. Pubs were the community centres of the working class, the only places where you could warm your bones, share news, and forget, for a few hours, the ache in your muscles. Sunday evening gatherings often stretched late, fueled by cheap gin or porter, because what else was there to do? Theatres were expensive, parks were few, and home was often a single room with a leaky roof. So you drink, you sing, you tell stories. And by Monday morning your body is staging a quiet mutiny. The hangover isn't just a headache, it's a full system protest. Your hands tremble too much to thread a shuttle. Your eyes blur at the sight of spinning bobbins. The noise of the mill, usually a background hum, feels like a physical assault, so you stay away. It's not laziness, it's self-preservation wrapped in a fog of regret. There's a quirky fringe detail that surfaces in some local archives from Lancashire. In certain pubs near textile mills, landlords would keep a St. Monday ledger, where regulars could scribble their names if they planned to skip work. It wasn't an official document, more like a communal joke, but it served a purpose. If the foreman came asking, the pub keeper could vaguely say, "Oh, a few lads were in last night." But they didn't say where they were headed. The ledger itself was often written in code or nicknames, a playful layer of secrecy. Some entries were just drawings, a crooked mug, a sleeping cat, a broken clock. It's a tiny, humanizing glimpse into how workers navigated the tension between survival and system. Historians still argue whether these ledgers were genuine tools of solidarity, or just the whimsical doodles of bored publicans with too much time on their hands. Either way, they hint at a culture that found humour and connection in the very act of resisting the relentless tick of industrial time. You wander a little further, and the city reveals its dual nature. In the wealthier districts, shops are open, clerks in crisp attire hurry about their business, and the rhythm of commerce hums along uninterrupted. But in the working-class neighbourhoods, time bends. Children play in the streets with hoops and sticks, their laughter sharp and clear against the muted backdrop. Women barter at market stalls for slightly wilted vegetables, their voices low and practical. There's a sense of stolen time, of life happening in the margins of the schedule. You pass a group of men gathered around a street performer, juggling worn-out clogs. They watch with half smiles, their hands in their pockets, not in a hurry to be anywhere else. It's a scene that would horrify a factory inspector, but to you, it feels like breathing. This is what rest looks like when it's not planned, not sanctioned, not polite. It's messy, it's human, and it's utterly chaotic from the perspective of efficiency. But chaos has consequences. You can feel them in the air, a subtle tension beneath the surface calm. The foreman at the mill isn't just frustrated, he's calculating. Every empty loom represents lost wages, missed deadlines, a potential reprimand from the owner. The owner, in turn, is looking at ledgers that don't add up, at contracts that might be jeopardized. The entire system is built on predictability, on the assumption that labor will be available when the whistle blows. St. Monday throws a wrench into that machinery. It's not an organized strike. It's something more subtle, more pervasive. It's 1,000 individual decisions that add up to a collective pause. And while it feels like freedom in the moment, it also sows the seeds of a response. The bosses are watching. They're taking notes. and they're starting to think about solutions that involve not just punishment but negotiation. You sense that shift on the horizon, a faint pressure building, like the calm before a storm. But for now, the morning stretches on, soft and unhurried. You find a spot on a sun-warmed wall, sit down and close your eyes. The sun feels good on your face. Somewhere a dog barks, a cart rumbles by. And for this stolen hour, you are not a worker. You are just a person breathing, resting, existing outside the grind. It can't last. Nothing ever does. But in this moment it's enough. You let the quiet settle over you, a fragile blanket against the noise that will inevitably return. You step into the owner's office, and the air changes. It's still thick with coal dust, but now there's an undercurrent of ink, polished mahogany, and something sharper, frustration maybe, or the metallic tang of anxiety. The room is orderly in a way the factory floor never is. Ledgers stack neatly on shelves. A brass inkwell sits precisely centered on the desk. A large window looks out over the courtyard, where the foreman still paces, his silhouette small and agitated against the grey brick. You watch as the owner, a man in a dark wool coat, his hair slicked back, his fingers stained with ink, taps a pen against the ledger's edge. The sound is rhythmic, impatient. He doesn't turn to look at you, he doesn't need to. He knows you're there. He knows everyone is there, or rather, not there. The empty workshop echoes in his mind like a personal insult. His day started before yours, of course. He reviewed the weekly production targets, checked the orders from London, calculated the cost of idle machinery, and then he saw it, the attendance sheet for Monday. Half the names are blank, or marked with a faint damning asterisk. He sighs, a long, slow exhalation that seems to carry the weight of the entire enterprise. This isn't just about lost hours, it's about control. The factory system was built on the promise of predictability. Raw materials in, finished goods out, with time as the reliable conduit between. But St. Monday introduces a variable that can't be easily quantified. Human exhaustion. You can measure the output of a loom down to the yard of cloth, but how do you measure the cost of a worker's depleted spirit? The owner doesn't try, he sees only the deficit. The ledger shows red where there should be black, and red, in his world, is a threat. Mainstream business records from the period reveal that factory owners employed a range of tactics to combat Monday absenteeism. Some imposed fines for unexcused absences, docking wages that families could scarcely afford to lose. Others threatened dismissal, though in tight labour markets, that bluff wasn't always credible. A few experimented with Monday morning bonuses, small incentives for showing up on time, but these often backfired, seen as bribes rather than rewards. The core dilemma was structural. The industrial model demanded regularity, but the human body and the pre-industrial rhythms it clung to operated on a different logic. Owners like Richard Cobden and John Bright, later famous for political reform, wrote privately about the Monday problem as a key obstacle to efficient production. They framed it not as a labour issue, but as a managerial one, a puzzle to be solved with systems, not sympathy. And here's where the quirky fringe detail slips in. In some Midlands factories, owners hired Monday catchers, literally, men paid to roam the pubs and lodging houses early on Monday morning, rousting workers and escorting them to the mill. These catchers were often former soldiers or toughs, known for their persuasive voices and firm grips. They'd carry a list of names, a flask of strong coffee, and sometimes a whiff of smelling salts for the particularly afflicted. It was a bizarre, almost comical solution, using human shepherds to herd exhausted humans back into the industrial fold. Some catchers became local characters, known by nicknames like Wakeham Jack or Monday Murphy. Their existence highlights the absurd lengths to which the system would go to enforce its timetable. Historians still argue whether these catchers were effective deterrents or merely a costly, theatrical display of authority that did little to address the root cause of worker fatigue. You watch the owner dip his pen and make a note in the ledger. The scratch of nib on paper is loud in the quiet room. He's not just recording absences, he's calculating ripple effects. A delayed order here might mean a penalty clause there. A missed shipment could lose a client to a competitor in Leeds. The entire network of commerce depends on the smooth flow of goods, and that flow starts with bodies showing up to tend machines. His frustration isn't just emotional, it's economic. It's the cold, hard math of capital. He looks out the window again, and his expression softens for a fraction of a second. Not with empathy, but with recognition. He knows on some level that the workers aren't lazy. He's seen them on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, moving with a weary diligence. He knows the noise, the heat, the relentless pace of the floor, but acknowledging that would complicate the simple narrative of discipline and reward that underpins his authority. So he doesn't. He doubles down on the narrative. The problem is moral, not material. The solution is stricter oversight, not shorter hours. But stricter oversight has its limits. You can't watch every worker every minute. The factory is too large, the shift's too long. And the workers have their own networks, their own ways of communicating, of resisting. The owner senses this. He feels the system straining against its own constraints. There's a moment, just a flicker, where he considers an alternative. What if, instead of fighting the current, he redirected it? What if he offered something in exchange for reliability? The thought is radical, almost heretical. The prevailing wisdom of the age says labor is a commodity to be purchased at the lowest price and used to its fullest. To give something back, time, rest, autonomy, seems like surrender. But the ledgers don't lie, and the ledgers are showing a pattern that can't be ignored. Monday losses are eating into profits. Something has to change. You can almost hear the gears turning in his mind, not unlike the machinery downstairs. He thinks about the weekend. Sunday is already protected by law and custom, a day of rest mandated by Sabbath observance. But Sunday rest is often anything but restful for workers, filled with chores, family obligations, and yes, the drinking that fuels Monday's absence. What if the rest could be structured? What if it could be moved or split or offered as a trade? The idea is nascent, fragile. It doesn't have a name yet, but it's there in the space between frustration and calculation. The owner sets down his pen. He leans back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. He looks at the clock on the wall, its steady tick a reminder of the very resource he's struggling to manage, time. It slips away whether you use it or not. The question is, how do you make it work for you, not against you? Outside, the foreman finally gives up pacing and heads back inside. His boots echo in the corridor. The owner doesn't call for him, not yet. He needs to weigh options, consult with other owners, perhaps test a small experiment. The solution won't come from force alone. It will require a compromise, a subtle renegotiation of the social contract between capital and labour. And that compromise, when it comes, will change everything. Not just for the owner, not just for the worker, but for the very concept of time itself. You feel that shift in the air, a subtle realignment of possibilities. The chaos of St. Monday has forced a moment of reflection. And from reflection sometimes comes innovation. The owner stands, straightens his coat and walks to the window. He watches the courtyard, the empty looms visible through the high windows. He takes a deep breath. The decision isn't made yet, but the path is beginning to clear. You step back from the office, leaving him to his thoughts. The factory hums around you, a machine waiting for its human parts to return. And somewhere in the quiet space between intention and action, the first seeds of the weekend are taking root. You feel the change before you hear it. It's subtle, a shift in the air pressure, like the moment before rain. The factory whistle still blows at 6, sharp and unwavering, but now, on Saturday, it blows twice. The first call marks the end of the morning shift. The second, an hour later, signals something new, freedom. Not the chaotic, hungover freedom of St. Monday, but something structured, something promised. You finish your task at the loom, your fingers moving with the practiced ease of muscle memory, and when the second whistle sounds, you don't hesitate. You power down the machine, wipe your hands on a rag, and walk toward the gate. The foreman stands by the entrance, clipboard in hand, but he's not checking for absences. He's nodding, a simple, almost imperceptible gesture of acknowledgement. You step out into the afternoon light, and the world feels different. The sun is higher, warmer. The streets are busier, but with a different energy. Not the frantic rush of weekday commerce, but a slower, more deliberate pace. People are smiling, not broadly, not extravagantly, but with a quiet contentment that softens the edges of their faces. You've just experienced the Saturday half-holiday, and it feels like a small revolution. The compromise wasn't born overnight. It emerged from months of quiet negotiation, of owners testing the waters with pilot programs in select mills, of workers proving that a guaranteed afternoon off could lead to more reliable mornings. The logic was elegant in its simplicity. Give workers Saturday afternoon in exchange for a sober, punctual appearance on Monday. No more Saint Monday chaos, no more empty workshops, just a predictable rhythm. Work hard Monday through Saturday morning, rest Saturday afternoon and Sunday, return refreshed on Monday. It was a trade, a bargain struck not in boardrooms but on the factory floor, in the spaces between the noise and the fatigue. Mainstream historical records from the 1840s and 1850s show this practice spreading rapidly across industrial Britain. Textile mills in Lancashire led the way, followed by potteries in Staffordshire, ironworks in the Midlands. Newspaper editorials began to praise the Saturday afternoon system as a boon to both productivity and public morality. Clergy approved, seeing it as a way to encourage Sabbath observance. Employers approved, seeing it as a way to stabilise output. And workers, well, they approved because it gave them something they'd never had before: planned, sanctioned rest. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a human touch to the policy. In some factories, the transition to the half-holiday was marked by a small, symbolic ritual. As workers left on Saturday afternoon, they'd pass a large, ornate hourglass placed near the gate. The foreman would flip it as the last person exited, and the sand would run out precisely at the moment the evening whistle would have blown. It was a visual reminder: your time is yours now, but it's measured, it's finite. Some workers would pause to watch the sand fall, a moment of quiet reflection before stepping into their afternoon. The hourglasses themselves became curious artifacts, often decorated with motifs of rest: a sleeping cat, a closed book, a quiet garden. A few survive in museum collections today, their glass clouded with age, the sand inside still and silent. Historians still argue whether these hourglass rituals were genuine gestures of goodwill from management or subtle tools of surveillance, a way to make workers feel the weight of time even in their leisure. Either way, they represent a fascinating moment where the industrial clock began to shape not just work, but rest itself. You wander through the town and the atmosphere is palpable. Shops that would normally be bustling with weekday errands now have a relaxed vibe. Bakers sell slightly stale bread at a discount, knowing workers have a few extra pennies to spend. Tailors take measurements for Sunday bests, their fingers quick and precise. Children run in the streets, their laughter echoing off the brick buildings, because their parents are home, at least for a few hours. You find yourself at the edge of a newly opened public park, a patch of green carved out of the industrial landscape. Families stroll along gravel paths, their steps slow and synchronized. Couples sit on benches, talking in low voices. An old man feeds pigeons, his movements deliberate, unhurried. There's a sense of collective decompression, a shared understanding that this time is different. It's not stolen, it's earned. And that makes all the difference. But the half-holiday isn't just about leisure. It's about preparation. You use the afternoon to mend clothes, to wash your face and hands properly, to visit the market for a small treat, a piece of fruit, a ribbon for your daughter's hair. You might stop by the pub, but not to drown your sorrows. Just for a pint, a chat, a moment of connection before the solemnity of Sunday sets in. The drinking is lighter, more social, less desperate. Because you know you have tomorrow to rest, truly rest, without the guilt of Monday morning hanging over you. The compromise has done more than just stabilize attendance. It's begun to reshape the psychology of time. Rest is no longer a reaction to exhaustion. It's a planned component of life. You can almost feel the concept taking root in your mind, a new way of organizing your days, your weeks, your very sense of self. The ripple effects are subtle but profound. With Monday mornings more reliable, production schedules become more predictable. Owners can plan shipments with greater confidence. Workers, knowing they have a guaranteed break, approach their labor with slightly less resentment. It's not utopia, far from it. The hours are still long, the conditions still harsh, the pay still meager. But there's a new rhythm to it all, a cadence that acknowledges human limits without romanticizing them. You sense that this compromise is just the beginning. If a half day on Saturday can yield such benefits, what might a full day bring? The question lingers in the air, unspoken but present, like the promise of spring in late winter. You find a quiet spot on a park bench and sit. The sun warms your shoulders. You watch a group of children playing a simple game of tag, their movements light and free. For a moment you forget the loom, the noise, the dust. You just breathe. And in that breath, you feel the weight of history shifting ever so slightly. The chaos of St. Monday is receding, not through force but through negotiation. The weekend as we know it isn't here yet. But its skeleton is forming, bone by bone, in the quiet spaces between work and rest. You stand up, stretch, and start the walk home. The evening light casts long shadows across the cobblestones. Somewhere a church bell rings, marking the hour. You don't hurry, you don't need. The afternoon is yours, and for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. You let the quiet settle around you, a gentle blanket against the noise of the week. And as you walk, you carry with you the faint, hopeful sense that time, once a master, might just become a companion. You wake on Sunday morning, and the city feels different. Not just quieter, though it is that, but softer, as if someone has draped a heavy velvet curtain over the usual clamour. The factory whistle is silent, the clatter of carts on cobblestones is muted. Even the birds seem to sing in a lower register. You stretch in your bed, the sheets rough against your skin, and for a moment you forget what day it is. Then you remember Sunday. And Sunday, in this new Victorian world, isn't just a day off, it's a day of purpose, a day of stillness, a day that belongs, in theory at least, to something higher than machinery or markets. You rise slowly, deliberately, because haste feels inappropriate. The air in your room is cool, still, carrying the faint scent of yesterday's coal smoke mixed with something cleaner. Soap, maybe, or the lavender sachet tucked in your drawer. You dress with care, not because you're going to work, but because today demands a different kind of attention. And as you step out into the street, you realize you're not just observing a day of rest. You're participating in an experiment, one that aims to reshape not just your schedule, but your soul. The push for this kind of Sunday didn't come from workers seeking leisure. It came from a powerful coalition of religious reformers, moral campaigners, and middle-class idealists known as the Sabbatarians. These weren't fringe zealots. They were influential voices in parliament, in pulpits, in the pages of widely read periodicals. They believed that the industrial age, with its relentless pace and moral ambiguities, was eroding the fabric of society. And the antidote, they argued, was a return to strict Sabbath observance, not just attending church, but embracing a day of absolute quiet, reflection, and spiritual renewal. No work, no commerce, no worldly amusements, just prayer, family, and contemplation. Mainstream historical records show that Sabbatarian societies flourished in the 1830s through 1850s, lobbying for laws that would close shops, ban public transport, and silence street vendors on Sundays. Their efforts weren't always successful in full, but they left an indelible mark on urban life. In cities like London, Edinburgh, and Bristol, Sunday became a day of enforced peace, a weekly pause button pressed by moral conviction rather than economic necessity. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a peculiar texture to the movement. Some Sabbatarian extremists went so far as to advocate for silent streets ordinances that would prohibit not just noise, but even certain colours on Sunday. Imagine walking down a road where bright reds or yellows were frowned upon as too cheerful for the solemn day. In a few small towns, local bylaws actually discouraged the hanging of colourful laundry on Sundays, preferring whites and greys that reflected the sombre mood. There are accounts of parishioners gently chiding neighbours for wearing a particularly vibrant bonnet to church, not out of malice, but from a genuine belief that visual quietude aided spiritual focus. It sounds almost comical today, but it reveals the depth of the Sabbatarian vision, a total sensory recalibration, where even your eyes were meant to rest. Historians still argue whether these colour-conscious practices were widespread cultural norms, or just the eccentric hobbies of a few overzealous parishes. Either way, they hint at a society trying to engineer stillness down to the smallest detail. You walk toward the church, and the streets confirm the Sabbatarian influence. Shops are shuttered, their windows dark, pubs are closed, their doors locked tight, no smoke curling from the chimneys. Even the newsboys are absent. No one is hawking papers on Sunday morning. The silence isn't empty though. It's filled with other sounds. The soft shuffle of feet on stone, the distant chime of a bell, the murmur of voices from an open window where a family reads scripture together. You pass a park, and instead of the usual Saturday afternoon bustle, you see couples walking slowly, heads bowed in conversation or contemplation. Children play quietly with simple toys, a wooden hoop, a cloth doll, their laughter muted as if they've absorbed the day's solemn tone. It's a strange, almost surreal atmosphere. The city hasn't disappeared, it's just been softened, edited, as if someone took the rough draft of urban life and carefully crossed out all the noisy, chaotic parts. The Sabbatarian vision wasn't just about restriction, it was about reorientation. They believed that by removing the distractions of commerce and entertainment, people would naturally turn inward, toward faith, family, and self-improvement. Sunday was meant to be a weekly reset, a chance to recharge not just your body, but your character. You can feel that intention in the air, in the way people move with deliberate slowness, in the way conversations lean toward the serious, the reflective. It's not oppressive, not exactly. It's more like a collective deep breath, a shared commitment to pause. And for a society exhausted by the grind of industrial life, that pause can feel like a gift. Even if it's a gift wrapped in rules, but rules have weight. You sense it in the way the foreman from your mill, usually so brisk and commanding, walks beside his wife with a gentle hand on her arm. You see it in the way the shopkeeper, who haggles fiercely on weekdays, now nods politely to passers-by without a hint of salesmanship. The Sabbatarian ideal has seeped into the social fabric, creating a temporary truce in the daily competition for survival. It's a fragile peace, dependent on collective buy-in, but for a few hours each week it holds, and the building looms before you, its stone facade weathered but dignified. The door stands open, inviting. Inside, the air is cool, scented with old wood and candle wax. Sunlight filters through stained glass, casting coloured patterns on the floor. You find a seat and the quiet envelops you. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence, of attention, of something larger than yourself. As the service begins, you listen to the words, not just with your ears, but with your whole being. The readings speak of rest, of renewal, of a God who rested on the seventh day. It's a radical idea, really, that even the divine values pause. That creation isn't just about making, but about stopping. You feel that idea settle in your chest, a gentle counterpoint to the relentless productivity of the other 6 days. And for a moment, you understand the Sabbatarian dream. It's not about control, it's about care. A care so deep it tries to legislate kindness, to mandate mercy, to build a society where everyone, even the weary worker, has a guaranteed moment to simply be. But dreams, even well-intentioned ones, can cast long shadows. You think of the street vendor who loses a day's income because of Sunday closing laws, the traveller stranded because coaches don't run, the family for whom the pub is not just a place of drink, but of community, now silent and inaccessible. The Sabbatarian vision isn't one-size-fits-all. It reflects the values of a particular class, a particular faith, a particular moment in history. And as you sit in that quiet church, you can't help but wonder, whose rest is this, really? Who gets to define what stillness should look like? The question lingers, unspoken, as the hymn swells around you. You join in the singing, your voice blending with the others, and for now, you let the doubt rest. Today is for peace, for quiet, for the gentle, persistent hope that maybe, just maybe, a day of stillness can heal a world in motion. You close your eyes and let the silence hold you. You step back out of the church, and the silence follows you like a shadow. But now, as you walk through the streets, you notice something else. It's not just quiet, it's dry. The pubs, those warm, noisy sanctuaries of weekend release, stand locked and dark. Their windows, usually glowing with lamplight and laughter, are shuttered. No smoke curls from their chimneys, no clink of glasses echoes from within. Just a row of closed doors, each one a small monument to the day's solemnity. You pass a theatre, its grand marquee blank, its velvet curtains drawn tight. No posters advertise tonight's performance. No crowd gathers at the entrance, buzzing with anticipation. The street itself feels different, wider, somehow emptier. The usual hum of commerce and conversation has been switched off, leaving behind a hushed grey landscape that feels less like peace and more like pause. A forced peace. This is the Dry Sunday, a direct result of Sabbatarian lobbying and local licensing laws that swept through Victorian Britain in the mid-1800s. Mainstream historical records show that the Sunday closing acts, particularly in Wales and parts of England, mandated that pubs, beer houses and places of public amusement remain shut from Saturday night until Monday morning. The goal was noble on paper: to protect workers from the temptation of drink, to encourage church attendance, to foster family time. But the reality on the ground was more complicated. For many working-class families, the pub wasn't just a place to get drunk. It was a community centre, a news exchange, a warm room when home was cold and damp. Closing it on Sunday didn't necessarily make people more pious. Sometimes it just pushed drinking into the shadows, or concentrated it into Saturday night with greater intensity. You can feel that tension in the air, the gap between intention and outcome, between moral ideal and human habit. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a strange footnote to the dry Sunday phenomenon. In some towns, enterprising individuals found loopholes in the law. Since the legislation targeted public houses, some began offering private Sunday tea services that just happened to include a discreet glass of ale or a splash of gin in the teapot. These tea parties became a quiet wink-and-nudge tradition in certain neighbourhoods, a way to maintain social connection without technically breaking the law. There are even accounts of Sabbath lemonade that was suspiciously potent, served in back rooms with the curtains drawn. It wasn't rebellion exactly, more like creative compliance, a gentle bending of rules to preserve a slice of weekend warmth. Historians still argue whether these workaround gatherings were harmless social adaptations or subtle acts of resistance against moral overreach. Either way, they reveal the enduring human desire for connection. Even within the strictest frameworks of restraint, you continue your walk, and the city's transformation is almost cinematic. The bustling market square, usually a cacophony of haggling voices and cartwheels, is now a study in stillness. Stalls are covered with heavy canvas, their wares hidden from view. The fishmonger's slab is empty, scrubbed clean. The flower seller's buckets are dry, petals tucked away for Monday. Even the stray dogs seem to move more slowly, as if absorbing the day's quiet mood. You pass a group of children playing a quiet game of marbles in the gutter, their whispers barely audible. Their parents watch from doorways, not with suspicion, but with a kind of gentle supervision that feels new, intentional. It's as if the entire city has agreed to lower its voice, to move in slow motion, to honour the day by embodying its spirit. But forced peace has its textures. You notice the way some men stand on street corners, hands in pockets, looking slightly adrift. Without the pub to anchor their Sunday afternoon, they wander, unsure how to fill the hours. You see women carrying extra bundles of laundry, using the closed shops as an opportunity to tackle chores that usually wait. The dry Sunday hasn't just removed alcohol, it's reshaped the rhythm of the day itself. Time stretches, unfamiliar and unstructured. For some, that's a gift, a chance to rest without expectation. For others, it's a puzzle, how to occupy a day when the usual outlets are closed. You feel that ambiguity in your own steps. Do you go home? Do you visit family? Do you simply sit and watch the clouds drift by? The options feel both limitless and constrained, a paradox that defines the Victorian Sunday. The closure of theatres and music halls adds another layer to the quiet. On other days, these venues pulse with life. The rustle of programmes, the murmur of audiences, the swell of orchestral music. But on Sunday, they stand silent, their stages empty, their seats covered in dust sheets. It's not just about entertainment. It's about the collective experience of joy, of story, of escape. By removing that outlet, the Sabbatarian vision asks people to find fulfillment in quieter, more introspective ways. For some, that means reading scripture or moral tracts at home. For others, it means long walks in the park, or writing letters to distant relatives. The dry Sunday, in theory, redirects energy inward. In practice, it sometimes just creates a low-grade restlessness, a sense of time waiting to be filled. You find yourself near the river, and the water offers its own kind of solace. It flows steadily, unhurried, reflecting the grey sky in its surface. A few boats are moored along the bank, their sails furled, their crews ashore. The only sound is the gentle lap of water against stone, the occasional call of a distant bird. It's a scene that feels timeless, untouched by the industrial churn of the week. You lean against a railing and watch, letting the rhythm of the river sink with your breath. For a moment, the forced peace of the city fades into the background, replaced by a deeper, more natural stillness. It's a reminder that quiet doesn't have to be imposed to be valuable. Sometimes it just is. But the dry Sunday isn't just about absence. It's about presence. The quiet streets create space for other kinds of connection. You notice neighbours chatting on doorsteps, conversations that might be rushed on weekdays now unfolding at a leisurely pace. You see families gathering in parlours, sharing a simple meal, telling stories that don't need music or applause to hold attention. The removal of commercial noise allows human noise, softer, warmer, more intimate, to come forward. It's a trade-off, one that the Sabbatarians hoped would elevate the soul. Whether it succeeded is a matter of perspective, but you can feel its impact in the way people interact, in the way time feels different, more spacious, more intentional. As the afternoon wears on, the light begins to soften, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The city remains quiet, but the quiet feels less forced now, more accepted. You start the walk home, your steps slow, your mind calm. The dry Sunday hasn't given you entertainment or drink or distraction, but it has given you something else, a chance to hear your own thoughts, to notice the world without the usual filters of noise and hurry. It's not a perfect system. It's not even a comfortable one always, but it's an experiment in living differently, in valuing stillness as much as activity. And as you turn onto your street, you realize that maybe, just maybe, that's worth something. You open your door, step inside, and let the quiet of home wrap around you. The day isn't over, but for now, it's enough. You step inside your home and the atmosphere shifts again. The street's hushed grey gives way to a different kind of quiet. One that's warmer, softer, but no less deliberate. The air smells of beeswax polish, of laundry dried in the fresh air, of the faint, lingering scent of yesterday's cooking. You move slowly, carefully, because today isn't for rushing, today is for ritual. And the first ritual is the clothing. You open the small wooden chest at the foot of your bed and lift out your Sunday best. The fabric is heavy, stiff, unfamiliar against your skin after a week of worn work clothes. For men, it's a dark wool coat, high-collared and restrictive, paired with trousers that don't quite allow for a full stride. For women, it's a dress with layers of petticoats, a bodice laced tight, sleeves that cover the wrists completely. You dress with care, button by button, tie by tie, feeling the weight of the day settle onto your shoulders along with the weight of the cloth. This isn't just clothing, it's a costume for a role, the respectable, pious, restful Victorian. The Sunday best isn't about comfort, it's about symbolism. Mainstream historical accounts from the era emphasize how clothing served as a visual marker of moral discipline. The stiff collars, the covered arms, the subdued colors, blacks, greys, deep blues, were meant to reflect the seriousness of the Sabbath. No bright patterns to distract the eye, no loose fits to suggest laziness. Every stitch was a reminder, today is different. Today you present your best self, not just to your family, not just to your congregation, but to God. The ritual of dressing became a form of meditation, a way to transition from the labor of the week to the stillness of the day. You can feel that intention in the way your fingers fumble slightly with the small buttons, in the way you smooth the fabric over your shoulders, checking for wrinkles. It's a performance, yes, but one that shapes the performer. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a peculiar texture to the Sunday dress code. In some Victorian households, families kept a separate Sunday mirror, a small, often ornate looking glass that was only unveiled on the Sabbath. The idea was that checking your appearance on Sunday required a special sanctified reflection, one that encouraged modesty rather than vanity. Some mirrors even had scripture verses etched around the frame. Let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, or be still and know. It was a subtle, almost whimsical way to reinforce the day's values through everyday objects. Historians still argue whether these Sunday mirrors were widespread cultural practices or just the eccentric traditions of a few devout families. Either way, they reveal the extent to which the Victorian ideal of rest permeated even the smallest details of domestic life. Once dressed, you move through the house, and the sounds of Sunday unfold around you. The most prominent is the ticking of the long case clock in the corner, mahogany, polished, dignified. Its rhythm is steady, unhurried, a metronome for the day's pace. You can almost hear the gears turning inside, a soft, mechanical whisper that fills the silence without breaking it. It's not the frantic tick of a factory timekeeper. It's the calm, confident pulse of domestic time. You pause to listen, letting the sound anchor you in the moment. Then there's the rustle of the newspaper. Not the daily broadsheet filled with market prices and shipping news, but the Sunday edition, a thicker, weightier publication with essays, sermons, and moral reflections. The paper itself is heavier, the ink slightly different. You turn a page, and the sound is crisp, deliberate, a soft shush that blends with the clock's tick. It's a soundscape of stillness, designed to calm rather than stimulate. You settle into a chair by the window, the newspaper in your lap, and let your eyes drift over the words. The articles aren't meant to excite, they're meant to edify. Stories of missionary work, reflections on scripture, gentle advice on family life. You read slowly, savouring the language, letting the ideas settle like dust motes in sunlight. Occasionally, you glance up and watch the street outside. The quiet continues, but now it feels familiar, comfortable. A neighbour walks by, also in Sunday best, and you exchange a nod. No words are needed. The shared understanding is enough. Inside the house breathes around you. The floorboards creak softly underfoot. A kettle begins to whisper on the stove, not yet boiling, just warming. These are the sounds of domestic stillness, the quiet music of a day set apart. But stillness isn't emptiness. You notice the way your family moves through the space. Your mother mending a sock with careful stitches, your father polishing his shoes with slow, circular motions, your younger sibling tracing patterns in the condensation on the window pane. Everyone is occupied, but no one is hurried. The activities are simple, repetitive, almost meditative. They don't demand attention. They invite presence. It's a different kind of productivity, one measured not in output but in peace. You feel that shift in your own body. The tension in your shoulders, built up over 6 days of labour, begins to soften. Your breath deepens, your thoughts, usually racing with worries about quotas and wages, slow to a gentle amble. This is what the Victorian Sunday promises, not just rest from work, but restoration of self. The restrictive clothing, once a burden, now feels like a boundary. It reminds you to move slowly, to speak softly, to carry yourself with intention. The high collar keeps your posture straight. The heavy skirt discourages sudden movement. Even the buttons, small and numerous, require patience to fasten and unfasten. Every element of the Sunday best is a physical cue to embody the day's values. It's a form of wearable mindfulness, though they wouldn't have called it that. You can almost hear the moralists of the era nodding in approval. Dress the body rightly, and the soul will follow. But rituals have their tensions. You feel a slight itch under the stiff collar. Your feet ache in the polished shoes that haven't been broken in for casual wear. The newspaper's moralizing tone sometimes feels heavy, prescriptive. Stillness, while calming, can also feel confining, like a room with too few windows. You wonder briefly if the Victorian Sunday is too perfect, too controlled. If the quest for sacred stillness sometimes forgets the human need for spontaneity, for play, for unstructured joy. The question lingers, unspoken, as you turn another page. You don't dwell on it. Today isn't for doubt. Today is for practice, for showing up in every sense of the word. As the afternoon light slants through the window, casting long golden rectangles on the floor, you set the newspaper aside. You stand, stretch carefully within the constraints of your clothing, and walk to the window. Outside, the city remains quiet, but the quiet feels different now, less imposed, more inhabited. You see families walking together, children holding parents' hands, couples strolling at a leisurely pace. The Sunday best is everywhere, a sea of dark wool and crisp linen moving through the grey streets. It's a visual harmony, a collective commitment to the day's rhythm. You watch for a moment, then turn back inside. The clock ticks. The kettle begins to sing softly. The house breathes. And you, in your restrictive, symbolic clothing, feel a strange sense of freedom. Not the freedom of abandon, but the freedom of structure, of knowing exactly what is expected, and choosing for this one day to meet that expectation with grace. You sit back down, close your eyes and let the sounds wash over you. The tick of the clock, the rustle of paper, the distant chime of a church bell, the soft shuffle of feet on wood. It's a lullaby of domesticity, a gentle reminder that rest can be a practice, not just a pause. And as you drift in that quiet space between wakefulness and sleep, you realize that the victim's rules and restrictions has given you something precious, a moment to simply be. No looms, no whistles, no ledgers, just you in a room, in a day, in a breath. It's not perfect, it's not easy, but it's enough. For now, it's enough. You move toward the kitchen and the air changes again. The quiet of the parlour gives way to a different kind of stillness, one that's warm, fragrant, anticipatory. The scent hits you first, rosemary, thyme, the earthy perfume of root vegetables, and underneath it all, the rich, slow promise of beef. It's not a hurried smell. It's not the sharp sizzle of weekday frying or the quick boil of a makeshift supper. This is the aroma of time itself, of hours folded into flavour, of patience made edible. You pause in the doorway and watch. The Sunday roast isn't just a meal, it's a ritual, a centerpiece. The week's most important act of domestic alchemy, where simple ingredients transform through slow heat and careful attention into something that feels like comfort, like continuity, like home. The preparation begins early, but never hastily. Your mother, or perhaps you, if you've taken on the task, moves around the kitchen with a rhythm that feels almost musical. The chopping of carrots and potatoes is deliberate, each piece cut to a similar size, not for efficiency but for harmony. The onions are peeled with care, their papery skins collected in a small bowl rather than scattered. The beef, a modest cut that's been saved for this moment, is patted dry, seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in a heavy pan to lock in the juices. But the searing isn't the main event, it's the prelude. The real work happens in the oven, where the meat will spend hours at a low, steady temperature, turning tender, turning fragrant, turning into the anchor of the day. Mainstream historical records from Victorian cookbooks and household manuals emphasize the Sunday roast as a cornerstone of working-class and middle-class life alike. For families who ate simply throughout the week, porridge, bread, broth, the roast represented a weekly indulgence, a chance to gather around a shared centerpiece that signaled both prosperity and piety. It was nutrition, yes, but also symbolism, the bounty of creation, the reward of labor, the warmth of family. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a peculiar footnote to the Sunday roast tradition. In some Victorian households, the carving of the roast was governed by an unspoken hierarchy of knives. The father, or head of household, would use a special Sunday carving knife, often longer, sharper, and more ornate than everyday cutlery, reserved solely for this purpose. Some families even kept the knife in a velvet-lined box, brought out only once a week. There are accounts of children being taught to recognize the knife its handle alone, a small lesson in reverence for the ritual. In a few eccentric homes, the knife was blessed by the local vicar at the start of each year, a practice that blurred the line between domestic custom and religious observance. Historians still argue whether these carving knife traditions were widespread cultural norms or just the whimsical habits of particularly devout families. Either way, they reveal how deeply the Victorian Sunday infused even the smallest domestic acts with meaning. You settle at the table, not to eat yet, but to witness. The kitchen becomes a theatre of slow motion. The pot simmers on the stove, its lid slightly ajar, releasing gentle puffs of steam that carry the scent of herbs and meat. The vegetables roast in a separate pan, their edges caramelizing to a golden brown. The gravy made from the pan drippings thickens slowly, stirred with a wooden spoon that's been used for this purpose for years, its handle worn smooth by generations of hands. Every movement is deliberate, unhurried. There's no rush. The roast will be ready when it's ready, and that's the point. In a world governed by factory whistles and production quotas, the Sunday roast offers a different kind of time, one that bends to the needs of flavor, of care, of presence. You can feel that shift in your own body. Your shoulders relax, your breath deepens. The tension of the week, still lingering in your muscles, begins to soften in the warm, fragrant air. The sounds of the kitchen blend into a lullaby of domesticity. The soft bubble of gravy, the gentle crackle of roasting fat, the occasional clink of a spoon against a bowl. These aren't disruptive noises. They're comforting ones, familiar and reassuring. They fill the silence without breaking it, like a soft melody played just below the threshold of attention. You close your eyes for a moment and let the sounds wash over you. The rhythmic stirring, the quiet shuffle of feet on tile, the distant tick of the parlour clock, still keeping time, but now as a backdrop rather than a metronome. It's a soundscape of care, of patience, of love made tangible through action. But the Sunday roast isn't just about the cooking. It's about the waiting. The hours between preparation and consumption become a form of meditation. You might sit by the window, reading a passage from a moral tract, or mending a small tear in a handkerchief, or simply watching the light change as the afternoon wears on. The anticipation builds, not with excitement, but with a gentle, growing warmth. You know the meal will come, you trust the process, and in that trust there's a kind of peace. It's a lesson in delayed gratification, in the value of slow rewards. In a society increasingly obsessed with speed and efficiency, the Sunday roast insists that some things can't and shouldn't be rushed. When the meal is finally served, it arrives with a quiet ceremony. The roast is placed at the center of the table, steam rising in gentle curls. The vegetables are arranged around it, their colors vibrant against the dark meat. The gravy is poured into a small jug, its surface glossy and rich. Everyone gathers, still in their Sunday best, and for a moment no one speaks. You look at the food, at the faces around the table, at the soft light filtering through the window, and then with a simple nod or a murmured grace you begin. The first bite is always the most profound. The meat is tender, falling apart at the gentlest pressure of the fork. The vegetables are soft but not mushy, their natural sweetness enhanced by the roast. The gravy ties it all together, rich but not heavy, savory but not salty. It's a harmony of flavors, a balance achieved through time and attention. You eat slowly, savoring each bite, not just for the taste but for the meaning. This meal represents more than nutrition. It represents the week's labor, the family's unity, the day's stillness. It's a tangible reminder that rest can be nourishing, that patience can be rewarding, that the simplest acts, done with care, can become sacred. You notice the way your family eats. No rushing, no distractions, just the quiet enjoyment of food and company. Conversations are soft, reflective. Stories are shared, not shouted. Laughter is gentle, warm. The Sunday roast creates a space for connection, for presence, for the kind of intimacy that's hard to find in the noise of everyday life. As the meal winds down, the plates are cleared with the same deliberate care that marked the preparation. Leftovers are wrapped neatly, saved for Monday's supper, a small practical benefit of the ritual. The kitchen is tidied but not hastily. The pot is soaked, the utensils washed, the table wiped clean. Every action part of the ritual's closing, a way to honor the meal by treating its aftermath with respect. You step back and look at the clean kitchen, the quiet house, the soft light of late afternoon. The day isn't over, but its centerpiece has been shared, its purpose fulfilled. You move to the parlor, settle into your chair, and let the warmth of the meal settle in your stomach, in your spirit. The clock ticks, the fire crackles softly, the house breathes, and you, full and calm, feel the gentle weight of the Victorian Sunday wrap around you like a blanket. It's not a perfect system. It's not always comfortable, but it offers something rare, a rhythm that honors both labor and rest, both community and contemplation, both body and soul. You close your eyes and let the quiet hold you. The week will come again with its noise and its demands, but for now, for this moment, you are here, you are fed, you are at peace, and that in the end is enough. You step out of your home on a Saturday afternoon, and the air feels different now. Not just quieter, not just cleaner, but directed, as if someone has taken the chaotic energy of the weekend and gently, firmly pointed it towards something better, something edifying, something that won't end with a hangover on Monday morning. You feel it in the way people move, less aimless wandering, more purposeful strolling, less raucous laughter, more thoughtful conversation. It's as if the city itself has been given a syllabus, and you, whether you realize it or not, are enrolled. This is the age of rational recreation, a phrase that sounds almost comical today, but carried immense weight in Victorian drawing rooms, parish halls and reformist pamphlets. The idea was simple, if paternalistic. If you give working-class people wholesome, educational ways to spend their newfound leisure time, they'll naturally abandon the rowdy behaviors that so alarmed the middle class. Drinking, gambling, street brawling, and other forms of unproductive fun. Mainstream historical records show that societies for the diffusion of useful knowledge, mechanics institutes, and temperance leagues flourished in the mid-1800s, offering lectures, reading rooms, chess clubs, and botanical gardens as alternatives to the pub. The goal wasn't just to entertain, it was to elevate, to shape character, to turn idle hands into industrious minds. You can feel that intention in the way a pamphlet is pressed into your hand as you pass a church door, its title promising improvement through evening study, or the joys of natural history. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a peculiar texture to the rational recreation movement. In some towns, reformers organized silent concerts where audiences were encouraged to listen to classical music without applauding, clapping, or making any noise at all until the very end. The idea was that true appreciation required stillness, focus, a kind of meditative attention that mirrored Sabbath observance. Attendees would sit in rows, hands folded, eyes closed or fixed gently on the performers, absorbing sonatas and symphonies in near total silence. It was an extreme experiment in cultivating refined leisure, one that sometimes backfired when audience members, unused to such restraint, would accidentally cough or rustle a program and receive gentle but firm shushes from their neighbors. Historians still argue whether these silent concerts were genuine attempts to deepen musical appreciation or just another form of social control, a way to teach the working class how to behave in polite society. Either way, they reveal the lengths to which reformers would go to reshape not just what people did with their free time, but how they experienced it. You wander toward the local Mechanics Institute, a modest brick building with large windows and a sign that reads, "Open to all who seek improvement." Inside, the atmosphere is hushed but not somber. Men and women, some in work clothes, others in their Sunday best, browse shelves of books, examine scientific instruments, or gather around a demonstration of a new steam-powered device. A lecturer stands at the front of a small hall, speaking in clear, measured tones about the principles of geometry or the wonders of astronomy. You listen for a while, and though the subject matter isn't always easy to grasp, there's a satisfaction in the attempt, in the feeling that your mind, like your body, deserves care and cultivation. The Institute isn't just a place to learn, it's a place to belong, to be part of a community that values curiosity, that sees leisure as an opportunity rather than a void. But rational recreation isn't just about formal institutions. It seeps into everyday life, reshaping hobbies and pastimes with a gentle, persistent hand. You notice that the local pub now hosts a weekly chess tournament, with prizes for the winners and a quiet corner set aside for players. The park offers guided nature walks, where a knowledgeable volunteer points out local flora and fauna, encouraging participants to keep journals of their observations. Even the simple act of gardening is reframed as a moral exercise, a way to connect with God's creation, to practice patience, to produce something useful. You try your hand at it, planting a few seeds in a small plot behind your lodging house. The soil feels rich and cool between your fingers. The rhythm of digging, planting, watering becomes a kind of meditation. You're not just growing vegetables, you're growing character. Or so the pamphlets say. The push for rational recreation isn't without its tensions. You feel them in the way some of your friends eye the chess tournament with skepticism, preferring the familiar comfort of a pint and a joke. You hear it in the muttered comments about fancy ideas and too much book learning. Not everyone welcomes the middle-class vision of wholesome leisure. For some, the pub isn't just a place to drink. It's a space of autonomy, of community, of resistance to the very notion that their free time needs to be improved. The reformers mean well, but their benevolence can feel like condescension, their guidance like governance. You understand both sides, the desire for structure, for meaning, for a leisure that enriches rather than depletes, and the desire for spontaneity, for joy, for a leisure that simply lets you be. Mainstream historical accounts reveal that the rational recreation movement had mixed results. In some communities, mechanics institutes and public lectures thrived, creating lasting cultures of learning and self-improvement. In others, they struggled to attract working-class participants, who found the offerings too formal, too distant from their everyday concerns. The movement's legacy is complex. It helped lay the groundwork for public education and community centres, but it also reflected a deep-seated anxiety about how the newly leisured working class might use its free time. You can feel that anxiety in the air, in the way reformers watch with hopeful but nervous eyes as people navigate their Saturday afternoons. Will they choose the lecture hall or the tavern, the nature walk or the street corner? The choice feels larger than it is, weighted with moral significance. But choices, even small ones, shape character. You find yourself drawn to a weekly drawing class offered at the institute. The instructor, a patient woman with kind eyes, teaches you to sketch simple objects: a leaf, a cup, a hand. At first your lines are shaky, your proportions off, but with practice they improve, and with improvement comes a quiet pride. Not the boastful kind, but the steady satisfaction of seeing your own progress. You begin to notice details you might have overlooked before. The way light falls on a surface, the subtle curves of a branch, the texture of fabric. Drawing becomes a way of seeing, of paying attention. And in a world that often demands you look past the details to meet a quota or finish a shift, that attention feels like a gift. You also notice that rational recreation isn't just about individual improvement. It's about social cohesion. The chess tournament brings together men from different trades, different neighborhoods, different backgrounds. The nature walk creates bonds between families who might otherwise never interact. The drawing class fosters a sense of shared purpose, of collective growth. These activities don't erase class differences, but they create spaces where those differences can soften, if only for a few hours. You feel that potential in the way strangers become acquaintances, acquaintances become friends, friends become a community. It's a quiet revolution, one that happens not in the streets or the factories, but in the spaces between. As the afternoon wears on, you step back out into the street. The city still feels directed, but now the direction feels less like an imposition and more like an invitation. You have options, you have choices. You have a weekend that can be more than just a pause from work. It can be a chance to grow, to connect, to explore. It's not perfect, it's not always easy, but it's a start. You walk home slowly, your mind humming with the day's lessons, your hands still faintly smelling of soil and charcoal. The evening light casts long shadows across the cobblestones. Somewhere a church bell rings, marking the hour. You don't hurry, you don't need to. The afternoon has been yours and you've used it well. Or at least you've tried. And in the Victorian worldview, that's often enough. You open your door, step inside, and let the quiet of home wrap around you. The week will come again, with its noise and its demand. But for now, for this moment, you are here. You are learning, you are growing. And that, in the end, is a kind of rest. You step through the iron gates, and the city falls away like a heavy coat you're happy to shed. The air changes instantly, cleaner, cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth, cut grass, and the faint sweet perfume of flowering shrubs. Your boots, usually scuffed against cobblestones, now sink slightly into a gravel path that crunches softly underfoot, a rhythmic, soothing sound that seems to sync with your breath. You pause for a moment just inside the entrance and take it in. This is the public park, a Victorian invention that feels almost miraculous after a week of soot and steam. It's not just green space, it's a carefully curated landscape of calm, designed to guide your leisure as surely as the factory whistle guided your labour. And today, on your Saturday afternoon or your quiet Sunday, you are meant to walk, not run, not play rough and tumble games, just walk. In slow rhythmic circles, the quintessential boring weekend activity perfected. Mainstream historical records show that the public park movement exploded in mid-19th century Britain, driven by a combination of public health concerns, moral reform and urban planning ideals. The 1843 Parks and Recreation Act, along with local initiatives in cities like Manchester, Leeds and London, funded the creation of vast green spaces specifically for working-class recreation. Designers like Joseph Paxton and William Andrews Nesfield didn't just plant trees and lay paths, they engineered experiences. Curving walkways encouraged gentle strolling rather than direct transit. Ornamental lakes offered serene views without the temptation of boating, which was often restricted to respectable hours and supervised groups. Flower beds were arranged in geometric patterns that pleased the eye without overwhelming it. Every element was intentional, a physical manifestation of the rational recreation philosophy. Leisure should be wholesome, structured, and improving. You can feel that intention in the way the path guides you, never forcing, always inviting, toward the next gentle bend, the next peaceful vista. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a peculiar texture to the Victorian park experience. In some parks, authorities installed silence bells, small, delicate chimes placed at intervals along the main walkways. The idea was that visitors would ring the bell softly as they passed, not to make noise, but to signal their presence in a gentle, non-disruptive way. It was a whimsical attempt to cultivate mindful movement, a reminder to walk softly, speak quietly, and respect the shared peace. Some parks even had whispering benches, strategically placed under trees, designed with acoustics that allowed two people to converse in low tones without being overheard by passers-by. Historians still argue whether these acoustic features were genuine innovations in public space design, or just the eccentric hobbies of park commissioners with too much time and budget on their hands. Either way, they reveal the Victorian obsession with engineering not just landscapes, but behavior itself. You begin to walk and the rhythm takes hold. Left foot, right foot, gravel crunching softly. The path curves gently to the left, revealing a small pond where ducks glide in silent procession. You watch them for a moment, their movements smooth, unhurried, and then continue. The path rises slightly, offering a view of the park's central lawn, where families stroll in small groups, their conversations muted, their steps slow. Children are present, but they're not racing or shouting. They're skipping ropes with quiet chants, rolling hoops with careful precision, or sitting on benches with parents, pointing at birds or clouds. It's a scene of controlled leisure, of joy that doesn't tip into chaos. You feel your own pace slow to match it. Your shoulders, still carrying the tension of the week, begin to relax. Your breath deepens, the noise in your mind, the worries about work, about money, about Monday, starts to fade, replaced by the simple awareness of step, breath, view. The park isn't just a place to walk, it's a place to see and be seen, but in a way that reinforces social norms. You notice the way people dress even on a Saturday afternoon. Many are in their best clothes, not the full Sunday formal wear, but a step above workaday attire. Women wear modest dresses with neat bonnets. Men sport clean waistcoats and polished boots. It's a subtle performance of respectability, a way to signal that you're using your leisure time properly. You feel that awareness in your own clothing, the way you smooth your jacket or adjust your hat as you pass others. It's not oppressive exactly. It's more like a shared agreement, a collective commitment to making the park a space of calm rather than chaos. And in a city where chaos is the default, that agreement feels like a gift. But the park's design does more than encourage quiet behavior. It shapes your experience of time itself. The curving paths prevent you from rushing from point A to point B. They force you to slow down, to notice the details, the way sunlight filters through oak leaves, the pattern of moss on a stone bench, the delicate architecture of a spider's web glistening with morning dew. You find yourself pausing more often, not because you have to, but because you want to. The park teaches you to linger, to savor, to be present. It's a lesson in a different kind of productivity, one measured not in output but in attention. In a world increasingly obsessed with speed and efficiency, that lesson feels radical, almost subversive. You pass a group of elderly men playing a quiet game of bowls on a manicured green. Their movements are slow, deliberate, each roll of the ball accompanied by a soft murmur of approval or gentle teasing. There's no shouting, no competitive fervor, just the soft thud of the bowl on grass, the quiet clink of the jack, the occasional chuckle. You watch for a while, and the scene feels timeless, a snapshot of leisure that could belong to any era, yet is distinctly Victorian in its restraint. You realize that the park isn't just providing space for recreation, it's modeling a way of being, a way to be together without noise, to enjoy without excess, to rest without guilt. Mainstream accounts from park superintendents and visitor diaries emphasize how these spaces became crucial for mental and physical health in industrial cities. Doctors of the era prescribed park walks for ailments ranging from melancholy to consumption, believing that fresh air, gentle exercise, and serene views could heal both body and soul. You can feel that belief in the way the park makes you feel. Lighter, clearer, more balanced. It's not magic, it's design. It's the intentional creation of an environment that supports well-being. And for workers whose daily lives are defined by noise, dirt, and strain, that support can feel like salvation. But even salvation has its limits. You notice the signs posted at intervals. No ball games, no loud conversation. Keep to the paths. The rules are gentle but firm, a reminder that this peace is maintained through collective compliance. You wonder briefly what happens to those who don't comply. The rowdy teenager who wants to kick a ball, the group of friends who want to laugh loudly, the couple who wants to dance. The park, for all its beauty, is a space of controlled freedom. It offers leisure, but only within certain boundaries. You understand the rationale. Without rules, the peace could shatter. But you also feel the tension, the quiet negotiation between individual desire and social order. As you complete your first circuit of the park, you find yourself back near the entrance. But you don't leave. You turn and walk the path again, the rhythm now familiar, comforting. The second time around, you notice details you missed before. The intricate ironwork on a bench, the variety of birds flitting between branches, the way the light changes as clouds drift overhead. The walk becomes a meditation, a moving prayer of sorts, where each step is a breath, each breath a moment of peace. You feel your mind quiet, your body relax, your spirit soften. This is what the Victorian park promises. Not excitement, not adventure, but restoration. A chance to reset, to recharge, to remember that life can be more than labour. The afternoon light begins to soften, casting long, golden shadows across the paths. The park empties slightly as families head home for supper, but those who remain move with the same gentle pace. You feel no rush to leave. The walk has become its own reward, a simple, repetitive act that somehow feels profound. You think of the factory whistle, the loom, the ledger, and then you think of this: gravel underfoot, birdsong overhead, the quiet company of strangers sharing a space of calm. It's not a revolution, it's not even particularly interesting by most standards, but it's enough, more than enough. It's a reminder that rest can be a practice, that peace can be cultivated, that the simplest acts, like walking in a circle, can become a form of grace. You complete your final circuit and step back through the iron gates. The city greets you with its usual sounds and smells, but they feel different now, less oppressive, more manageable. You carry the park's calm with you, a quiet reservoir of peace to draw from as the week resumes. You walk home slowly, your steps still rhythmic, your breath still deep. The evening light casts a warm glow over the cobblestones. Somewhere a church bell rings, marking the hour. You don't hurry. You don't need to. The afternoon has been yours, and you've used it well. Or at least, you've tried. And in the Victorian worldview, that's often enough. You open your door, step inside, and let the quiet of home wrap around you. The week will come again, with its noise and its demands. But for now, for this moment, you are here. You are walking. You are resting. And that, in the end, is a kind of revolution. You push open the heavy wooden door, and the air inside hits you like a soft, cool hand on your forehead. It smells of old paper, polished wood, and something else. Something indefinable but deeply calming, like the scent of knowledge itself. The noise of the street fades instantly, replaced by a silence so profound you can hear your own heartbeat. The gentle rustle of your clothing, the distant, almost imperceptible tick of a clock, somewhere deep within the building. You pause on the threshold, letting your eyes adjust to the dim golden light filtering through high arched windows. This is the public museum, or perhaps the free library, and you've just stepped into a cathedral of quiet. The space unfolds before you like a carefully composed symphony of stillness. Long rows of bookshelves stretch into the distance, their spines uniform in color and size, creating a rhythmic pattern that pleases the eye without demanding attention. Display cases line the walls, housing artifacts from distant lands, Egyptian amulets, Roman coins, botanical specimens pressed between glass, each one labelled with neat, handwritten cards. The floor is polished wood, so smooth and well-maintained that your footsteps produce only the softest squeak, a sound that feels almost sacrilegious in the hushed atmosphere. You move slowly, deliberately, as if the building itself is asking you to match its pace. Mainstream historical records show that the mid-19th century saw an explosion of public museums and free libraries across Britain, fueled by the same rational recreation ethos that shaped the parks. The 1850 Public Libraries Act allowed towns to levy taxes for library services, while institutions like the South Kensington Museum, later the V&A, opened their doors to working-class visitors on weekends and evenings. The goal was explicit: to provide improving leisure, to expose the masses to art, science, and culture in an environment that encouraged reflection rather than revelry. You can feel that intention in every carefully arranged exhibit, in every hushed whisper. in the very architecture that seems designed to lower your voice and slow your step. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a peculiar texture to the Victorian museum experience. In some institutions, visitors were issued silent slippers, soft felt-soled shoes that could be worn over their regular boots to minimize noise on the polished floors. These slippers were often kept in a basket near the entrance, and attendants would gently remind patrons to change before proceeding. Some museums even had whispering galleries, designed with special acoustics that allowed two people to converse in barely audible tones without disturbing others nearby. It was an extreme commitment to quiet, a physical manifestation of the belief that learning required stillness. Historians still argue whether these acoustic accommodations were genuine innovations in public accessibility or just another form of behavioral control, a way to teach the working class how to move and speak in respectable spaces. Either way, they reveal the Victorian obsession with engineering not just knowledge, but the very manner of its reception. You begin to walk, and the squeak of your shoes becomes a kind of meditation. Each step is a reminder to move gently, to respect the space, to honor the silence. You pass a display of geological specimens, rocks and minerals arranged by color and composition, and pause to examine a piece of amethyst, its purple facets catching the light in a way that feels almost magical. You don't touch, of course. Touching is forbidden, but you don't need to. The act of looking, of really seeing, is enough. You notice details you might have overlooked in a noisier setting, the subtle gradations of color in a butterfly's wing, the intricate carving on a medieval manuscript, the delicate veins in a fossilized leaf. The quiet allows your attention to deepen, to linger, to appreciate. It's a different kind of learning, one that happens not through lecture or instruction, but through observation and reflection. You move to the library section, and the atmosphere shifts slightly. The silence here is even more profound, if that's possible. Rows of reading tables stretch before you, each one occupied by a solitary figure bent over a book or a notebook. The only sounds are the soft turn of a page, the gentle scratch of a pen, the occasional barely audible cough. You find an empty seat and settle in, pulling a volume from the shelf, a travelogue about the Scottish Highlands, or perhaps a primer on basic astronomy. The book feels substantial in your hands, its cover worn smooth by generations of readers. You open it, and the scent of old paper rises to meet you, comforting and familiar. You begin to read, and the words seem to sink into your mind more easily than they would in a noisier environment. The quiet isn't empty, it's fertile. It creates space for ideas to take root, for connections to form, for understanding to grow. But the hushed atmosphere isn't just about individual learning. It's about shared respect. You notice the way other patrons move, slowly, carefully, always mindful of the space and the people in it. A young woman glances up from her book and offers you a small, silent smile before returning to her reading. An elderly man carefully reshelves a volume, his movements precise and gentle. There's a sense of community here, but it's a quiet community, one built on mutual consideration rather than conversation. You feel that sense of belonging, of being part of something larger than yourself, even in the silence. It's a different kind of social connection, one that doesn't require words to be meaningful. Mainstream accounts from library superintendents and museum curators emphasize how these spaces became crucial for self-education and social mobility in the Victorian era. For workers who had little formal schooling, the Free Library offered a chance to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and beyond. For families who couldn't afford travel, the museum offered a window into the wider world. You can feel that potential in the way the books are organized, by subject, by difficulty, with clear signage to guide the novice. It's a system designed to welcome, not intimidate. And for someone whose daily life is defined by routine and repetition, that welcome can feel like liberation. But liberation has its boundaries. You notice the rules posted near the entrance. No talking above a whisper, no food or drink. Return books by the due date. The guidelines are gentle but firm, a reminder that this peace is maintained through collective compliance. You wonder, briefly, what happens to those who struggle with the silence. The child who wants to ask a question. The visitor who feels overwhelmed by the sheer volume of knowledge. The person who learns better through discussion than through solitary reading. The museum and library, for all their generosity, are spaces of structured access. They offer knowledge, but only within certain frameworks. You understand the rationale. Without rules, the quiet could shatter. But you also feel the tension, the quiet negotiation between individual need and institutional order. As the afternoon wears on, you find yourself drawn to a particular exhibit, a collection of botanical illustrations, each one a masterpiece of detail and colour. You stand before them, letting your eyes wander over the delicate lines, the subtle shading, the precise labelling of each species. The quiet allows you to really see, to appreciate the artistry as much as the science. You think of the gardens outside, the parks you've walked, the natural world that surrounds you, and you realise that the museum isn't just showing you objects, it's teaching you to look, to notice, to value the beauty and complexity of the world. It's a lesson that extends far beyond the walls of the building, a way of seeing that can transform your everyday experience. You close the book in front of you, gently, carefully, and slide it back onto the shelf. You stand, stretch slightly within the constraints of the quiet, and begin the slow walk toward the exit. The squeak of your shoes on the polished wood feels familiar now, comforting, a rhythm that has accompanied your learning. You pass the reading tables, the display cases, the high windows, and with each step you carry a little more knowledge, a little more calm, a little more capacity for quiet attention. You push open the heavy wooden door, and the noise of the street greets you like a sudden chord in a symphony. But it doesn't overwhelm you. You've just spent hours in a space designed to cultivate inner stillness, and that stillness travels with you, a quiet reservoir you can draw from as the week resumes. You walk home slowly, your mind humming with the day's discoveries, your senses sharpened by the practice of looking. The evening light casts a warm glow over the cobblestones. Somewhere a church bell rings, marking the hour. You don't hurry, you don't need to. The afternoon has been yours, and you've used it well. Or at least you've tried, and in the Victorian worldview, that's often enough. You open your door, step inside, and let the quiet of home wrap around you. The week will come again, with its noise and its demands. But for now, for this moment, you are here. You are learning, you are seeing, and that, in the end, is a kind of rest. You step into the Sunday school room, and the air feels different from the rest of the house. It's not just quiet, it's structured quiet, the kind of silence that has been taught, practiced, rehearsed. Rows of wooden benches face a small podium, where a volunteer teacher, perhaps a local shopkeeper's wife or a retired clerk, sits with a well-worn Bible and a stack of slate tablets. Children file in slowly, still in their Sunday best, their shoes squeaking softly on the worn floorboards. They don't run, they don't whisper, they find their seats, fold their hands and wait. The lesson is about to begin, and in this space, waiting is part of the learning. Mainstream historical records show that Sunday schools proliferated across Victorian Britain as a key tool of moral and educational reform. Originally founded in the late 18th century by Robert Raikes, by the mid-1800s, they had become a cornerstone of working-class childhood, offering basic literacy, scripture memorization, and behavioral instruction to children who might otherwise have no formal education. The curriculum was deliberately repetitive, catechisms recited in unison, verses copied onto slates, hymns sung in gentle, measured tones. The goal wasn't just to teach reading, it was to cultivate discipline, to shape young minds toward piety, patience, and order. You can feel that intention in the room. The way the teacher's voice is calm but firm, the way corrections are offered softly, the way praise is given not for speed or cleverness, but for effort and attentiveness. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a peculiar texture to the Sunday school experience. In some parishes, children were taught a silent alphabet, a system of hand gestures that corresponded to letters, allowing them to spell words without making a sound. The idea was to reinforce the day's solemnity while still engaging young minds in learning. A raised finger for A, a curled thumb for B, and so on. It was a whimsical, almost playful approach to quiet discipline, one that sometimes led to quiet giggles when children tried to whisper secrets to each other using the code. Historians still argue whether these silent alphabets were genuine pedagogical tools or just the eccentric inventions of particularly creative Sunday school teachers. Either way, they reveal the Victorian commitment to making even silence educational. You watch as the lesson unfolds, The teacher writes a verse on the blackboard in neat, careful script. Be still, and know that I am God. The children copy it onto their slates, their chalk making soft, rhythmic scratches against the smooth surface. There's no rush, no competition. Just the gentle sound of learning, of minds absorbing not just words, but values. You notice the way a young girl concentrates, her tongue slightly between her lips as she forms each letter. The way a boy erases a mistake with careful precision, trying again until it's right. The repetition isn't mindless, it's meditative. Each stroke of the chalk, each recited verse, each folded hand is a practice in presence, in patience, in the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're part of something larger than yourself. But Sunday school isn't just about children. You see parents lingering near the door, watching with quiet pride, or participating in adult classes that offer similar lessons in scripture and morality. The space becomes a community hub, a place where generations gather not for entertainment, but for edification. The quiet discipline taught here extends beyond the classroom, shaping how families spend their Sundays at home, reading together, praying together, resting together. It's a ripple effect, one that reinforces the Victorian ideal of the Sabbath as a day of mental and spiritual renewal. You feel that ripple in your own life, in the way Sunday now feels different from the other days. Not just a pause from work, but a practice of peace. As the lesson winds down, the teacher offers a gentle benediction, and the children file out quietly, their slates tucked under their arms, their steps soft on the floor. You step outside, and the afternoon light feels warmer, soft, as if the quiet of the classroom has followed you into the street. But today isn't over. There's another kind of quiet waiting for you, one that moves rather than stays, one that carries you away from the city without ever leaving its rhythm behind. You walk toward the railway station, and the sound changes. The soft squeak of Sunday shoes on cobblestones gives way to the gentle, rhythmic chug of a steam engine in the distance. It's not the frantic whistle of a weekday commuter train. It's slower, softer, almost melodic. This is the excursion train, a Victorian innovation that brought the countryside to the city dweller for a few precious hours of fresh air and silent scenery. Mainstream historical accounts show that railway companies began offering cheap Sunday excursion fares in the 1840s and 1850s, specifically marketed to working-class families seeking rational recreation. The trains would depart in the early afternoon, wind through rolling hills and pastoral valleys, and arrive at a quiet destination, a seaside village, a forest grove, a historic ruin, where passengers could stroll, pick, and breathe air untainted by coal smoke before returning home by evening. The goal was wholesome leisure, structured movement, a chance to experience nature without the chaos of unguided travel. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a peculiar texture to the excursion train experience. In some railway carriages, companies installed silence compartments, sections where conversation was gently discouraged, and passengers were invited to enjoy the scenery in quiet reflection. These compartments were often marked with small, tasteful signs for those who seek stillness. Some even had curtains that could be drawn to block the view of passing industrial landscapes, focusing attention solely on the natural beauty beyond. Historians still argue whether these silence compartments were genuine attempts to enhance the passenger experience or just a marketing gimmick to attract middle-class travellers who preferred their leisure undisturbed. Either way, they reveal the Victorian belief that even travel could be a form of meditation, a moving prayer of sorts. You board the train and the interior feels like an extension of the Sunday schoolroom. Clean, orderly, hushed. Passengers settle into their seats with deliberate care, unfolding small picnic baskets, arranging shawls and newspapers with quiet precision. The train begins to move, and the rhythm of the wheels on the tracks becomes a lullaby. Chug, 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 steady and soothing. You look out the window, and the city falls away, replaced by fields of green, hedgerows dotted with wildflowers, the occasional cottage with smoke curling from its chimney. The scenery passes like a slow-moving painting, each frame more peaceful than the last. You feel your breath sink with the train's rhythm, your thoughts soften, your body relax. This isn't adventure, it's not excitement. It's something quieter, deeper, a chance to see the world without the pressure to do anything about it. The excursion isn't about destination, it's about journey. You might disembark at a small village, walk a quiet lane, sit by a stream for a few minutes, and then board the return train without ever feeling rushed. The whole experience is designed to be restorative, not stimulating. You notice the way other passengers move, slowly, thoughtfully, always mindful of the shared peace. A mother points out a bird to her child in a whisper. An elderly couple holds hands, watching the fields roll by. There's a sense of collective calm, a shared understanding that this time is for rest, for reflection, for simply being. But the excursion train, for all its tranquility, is still a product of industry. You feel that tension in the gentle vibration of the carriage, in the faint scent of coal smoke that occasionally drifts through the window. The very technology that enables this escape is the same one that creates the need for it. The train is a paradox, a machine of progress that offers a return to simplicity. You understand that paradox, accept it, even appreciate it, because in the end it works. It carries you away, if only for a few hours, and lets you breathe. As the afternoon wears on, the train begins its return journey. The light softens, casting long shadows across the fields. Passengers grow quieter, more contemplative, as the city skyline reappears in the distance. You feel no disappointment. The excursion wasn't about escape, it was about perspective. A reminder that peace exists, even if it's temporary, even if it's framed by industry. You disembark at the station, step back onto the cobblestones, and the city greets you with its usual sounds and smells. But they feel different now, less oppressive, more manageable. You carry the countryside's calm with you, a quiet reservoir of peace to draw from as the week resumes. You walk home slowly, your steps still rhythmic, your breath still deep. The evening light casts a warm glow over the streets. Somewhere a church bell rings, marking the hour. You don't hurry. You don't need to. The afternoon has been yours and you've used it well. Or at least you've tried. And in the Victorian worldview, that's often enough. You open your door, step inside, and let the quiet of home wrap around you. The week will come again with its noise and its demands. But for now, for this moment, you are here. You are learning. You are travelling. You are resting. And that, in the end, is a kind of grace. You wake on a Saturday morning, but the whistle doesn't blow. You lie there for a moment, listening to the quiet, half expecting the familiar metallic shriek to slice through the dawn. It never comes. Instead, there's just the soft rustle of sheets, the distant murmur of a neighbour's radio, the gentle creak of floorboards settling in the cool air. You get up, stretch and walk to the window. The street is still. Not the strained, forced quiet of a Victorian Sabbath, but something looser, softer. The factory gate remains shut. The bakery isn't even lighting its ovens yet. You've just stepped into the 1930s, and the calendar is quietly rewriting itself. The Saturday half-holiday, that neat little compromise born from exhausted loom tenders and frustrated mill owners, has begun to stretch. It's no longer just an afternoon reprieve. It's swallowing the morning too. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, industries across Britain and beyond are shifting toward a full day off. The 47 and 48-hour work weeks, once radical proposals debated in union halls and parliamentary committees, start taking root in textiles, engineering and manufacturing. You feel the change in the rhythm of your life. Saturday isn't just a pause anymore. It's a place, a full 24 hours detached from the machinery, from the ledgers, from the relentless tick of industrial time. The word itself, weekend, is slipping into everyday speech, no longer a novelty but a fixture. Mainstream labour records from the era show this wasn't a single decree, but a patchwork of negotiations, strikes and gradual policy shifts. Trade unions like the Amalgamated Engineering Union pushed hard for the 47-hour standard, arguing that shorter hours meant healthier workers, fewer accidents, and a more sustainable pace of production. Employers, initially resistant, began to notice something unexpected. Rested workers returned on Monday with sharper focus, fewer errors and less resentment. The math slowly began to make sense. And here's the quirky fringe detail that quietly anchors this new Saturday rhythm to your living room. As factories closed for the full day, families needed something to fill the suddenly spacious hours, and they found it in a polished wooden box sitting on the parlour shelf. The wireless. The BBC, sensing the cultural shift, deliberately restructured its Saturday evening programming, to pull people indoors. Instead of broadcasting light opera and serious lectures all week, they introduced Saturday night dance band sessions, serialized comedies, and gentle variety shows designed specifically for home listening. The idea was almost comically practical. If the factories were closed and the pubs were losing their monopoly on weekend entertainment, why not bring the pub's social buzz into the living room, minus the spilled ale? You twist the Bakelite dial, hear the soft static clear into a crisp melody, and settle into a chair. The radio becomes a companion to the new weekend, a way to fill the silence without breaking it. Historians still argue whether this broadcasting strategy was a genuine effort to enrich domestic culture, or a subtle attempt to keep newly leisured workers from gathering in political rallies, or unionizing more aggressively. Either way, it worked. Saturday nights became evenings of soft light, quiet laughter, and shared listenings, a domestic ritual that cemented the weekend as a time for home. You step outside and the neighborhood feels fundamentally altered. It's not just that people are staying in, it's that they're moving differently. Without the half-day pressure to rush errands, prepare for Sunday, or recover from a hangover, Saturday takes on a languid quality. You watch a neighbor slowly sweep his front step, taking breaks to chat with someone over the fence. A couple walks past, holding hands, not heading anywhere in particular. Children roll hoops in the street with a relaxed precision that would have been impossible a decade ago, when every minute was accounted for. The air itself feels different, less hurried, less heavy with the invisible weight of pending quotas. You breathe it in, and your shoulders drop another half-inch. This is what 2 days of uninterrupted time does. It doesn't just give you rest, it gives you breathing room. But the transition isn't seamless, and you feel the friction in the edges of daily life. Some factory foremen still struggle to adjust, pacing their offices on Saturday mornings out of sheer habit. Shopkeepers complain about inconsistent customer traffic, unsure whether to stay open or follow the new rhythm. The working class itself isn't entirely unified in celebration. For some, a shorter week means a smaller paycheck, and the math of survival still outweighs the luxury of leisure. Yet the momentum is undeniable. You can see it in the way Sunday begins to feel less like an isolated island and more like the second half of a continuous bridge. The rigid separation between holy day and half-day blurs into a single, cohesive block of time. The weekend isn't just a collection of hours anymore. It's a concept, a rhythm, a shared national exhale. Mainstream economic reports from the mid-1930s start tracking something fascinating. As the full weekend takes hold, consumer behavior shifts. With more time at home, families spend slightly more on groceries, on modest home repairs, on newspapers and magazines. The idea that leisure could actually stimulate commerce, rather than drain it, begins to take root in boardrooms that once viewed time off as a necessary evil. You notice it in your own routine. Instead of spending Saturday afternoon just trying to recover, you have time to actually live. You mend a shirt, you read a chapter of a book, you take a longer walk, you cook a slower meal. The weekend stops being a void to be filled and becomes a canvas to be painted. However simply, the psychological shift is subtle but profound. For generations, time was measured in shifts, in bells, in the relentless march toward Monday. Now you measure it in stretches. Saturday morning isn't a prelude to work, it's its own entity. Sunday isn't just a spiritual obligation, it's a continuation. Together, they form a 48-hour sanctuary that belongs entirely to you. You don't have to earn it with good behavior. You don't have to negotiate for it with your employer. It's just there, written into the fabric of the week like a promise kept. You can feel that promise in the way your mind begins to unwind on Friday evening. No longer braced for Saturday's half-day scramble, but settling into the knowledge that tomorrow will be quiet too. You sit by the window as evening approaches, the radio playing softly in the background. The light outside turns amber, then gold, then a deep velvety blue. Street lamps flicker on, one by one, casting long, peaceful shadows across the pavement. You don't feel the need to do anything. You don't check your watch. You don't count down the hours until Monday. You just exist in the space the weekend has carved out for you. It's boring by the standards of the previous century, utterly, gloriously boring. And in that boredom there's a kind of magic, a chance to hear your own thoughts, a chance to move without being pushed. A chance to remember that time isn't just something to be spent, it's something to be inhabited. The factory will open again. The ledgers will need balancing. The world will resume its loud, demanding pace. But not yet. For now, the gate stays shut. The dial stays tuned. The street stays quiet. You lean back, close your eyes, and let the 48-hour rhythm wash over you. It's not a revolution. It's not even particularly dramatic. But it's yours. And as the night deepens, you realize that's exactly what you've been waiting for. You feel the change in the air before you see it in the ledger. It's not the usual scent of coal smoke and damp wool that hangs over the industrial town. It's something thinner, sharper, the smell of uncertainty. The Great Depression has arrived, not with a bang, but with a slow, relentless squeeze. Orders dwindle, shifts shorten. The factory floor, once a symphony of clattering machinery, now echoes with empty spaces where looms stand silent. You report for work on Monday morning, but the foreman's clipboard looks different. Fewer names, shorter hours. A quiet anxiety hums beneath the usual routine. You're still employed, but the ground beneath your feet feels less solid, as if the very concept of work is shifting under the weight of a world in crisis. And then, almost quietly, a new idea begins to circulate. Not from the union halls this time, but from the boardrooms. What if, instead of laying off workers to cut costs, companies spread the available work more thinly? What if, instead of 48 hours for some and 0 for others, everyone worked 40 hours? The math is simple, almost elegant. Reduce hours, share the labor, keep families fed, maintain morale. It's not generosity. It's pragmatism wrapped in a thin veil of compassion. Mainstream historical records from the early 1930s show that forward-thinking firms like Boots, the chemist in Nottingham, began experimenting with the 5-day, 40-hour week precisely for this reason. Jesse Boot, the company's founder, wasn't just a businessman. He was a social reformer who believed that shorter hours could improve worker health, reduce turnover, and even boost productivity per hour. His experiments weren't isolated. Similar trials popped up in engineering firms, textile mills, and even some government offices across Britain and the United States. The logic was compelling. In a time of mass unemployment, preserving jobs mattered more than maximizing output from a shrinking workforce. And here's the quirky fringe detail that adds a peculiar texture to these Depression-era experiments. At Boots, management didn't just reduce hours. They introduced rest pauses, a short, scheduled breaks during the workday where employees were encouraged to sit quietly, practice deep breathing, or even nap in designated restrooms. The idea was that a few minutes of intentional stillness could recharge a worker more effectively than an extra hour of exhausted labor. Some factories went further, installing quiet corners, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs, where employees could retreat for 5 minutes of mental reset. It was a radical notion for the era, that rest wasn't just something you did after work, but something that could be woven into the workday itself. Historians still argue whether these rest pauses were genuine innovations in workplace wellness, or just a clever way to extract more focused labor from tired bodies. Either way, they reveal a fascinating moment when economic necessity and human compassion briefly aligned. You experience the shift in your own routine. Instead of 6 long days punctuated by a single sacred Sunday, you now have 2 full days off. Saturday isn't just a half day anymore. It's a complete pause. Sunday remains, but now it feels less like an isolated island of piety and more like the second half of a continuous sanctuary. The rhythm of your life softens. You wake on Saturday without the guilt of unfinished tasks, without the pressure to cram errands into a few precious hours. You move through the morning at a human pace. You brew tea slowly. You read the newspaper without rushing. You take a walk just because the light is nice. The weekend stops being a reward for endurance and starts being a rite of existence. But the transition isn't seamless, and you feel the friction in the edges of daily life. Some employers resist the change, viewing shorter hours as a threat to profitability. Some workers worry that fewer hours mean fewer wages, and the math of survival still looms large. Yet the momentum builds. You hear stories from other towns, other industries, of companies trying the 5-day week and finding unexpected benefits. Fewer accidents, less absenteeism, higher morale. The data slowly begins to speak. Productivity per hour actually increases when workers are rested. Errors decrease. Innovation, however modest, finds room to breathe. The weekend isn't just a luxury anymore, it's an investment. Mainstream labour studies from the mid-1930s start documenting something remarkable. As the 5-day week spread, worker health improves. Rates of fatigue-related illness decline. Mental health, though rarely discussed openly at the time, shows subtle signs of improvement in community surveys. The idea that leisure could be preventative medicine, rather than mere indulgence, begins to take root in public health circles. You notice it in your own body. The constant ache in your lower back, the one you've accepted as part of life, starts to ease. Your sleep deepens. Your thoughts feel clearer. The weekend isn't just time off, it's time to heal. The psychological shift is subtle but profound. For generations, time was measured in shifts, in bells, in the relentless march toward Monday. Now, you measure it in stretches. Saturday isn't a prelude to work, it's its own entity. Sunday isn't just a spiritual obligation, it's a continuation. Together they form a 48-hour sanctuary that belongs entirely to you. You don't have to earn it with good behavior. You don't have to negotiate for it with your employer. It's just there, written into the fabric of the week like a promise kept. You can feel that promise in the way your mind begins to unwind on Friday evening, no longer braced for Saturday's half-day scramble, but settling into the knowledge that tomorrow will be quiet, too. You sit by the window as evening approaches, the radio playing softly in the background. The light outside turns amber, then gold, then a deep, velvety blue. Street lamps flicker on one by one, casting long, peaceful shadows across the pavement. You don't feel the need to do anything. You don't check your watch. You don't count down the hours until Monday. You just exist in the space the weekend has carved out for you. It's boring by the standards of the previous century, utterly, gloriously boring. And in that boredom, there's a kind of magic, a chance to hear your own thoughts, a chance to move without being pushed, a chance to remember that time isn't just something to be spent, it's something to be inhabited. The factory will open again, the ledgers will need balancing, the world will resume its loud, demanding pace. But not yet. For now, the gate stays shut, the dial stays tuned, the street stays quiet. You lean back, close your eyes, and let the 48-hour rhythm wash over you. It's not a revolution, it's not even particularly dramatic, but it's yours. And as the night deepens, you realize that's exactly what you've been waiting for. You notice it first in the small things. The bakery down the street now closes at the same time every Friday evening, without fail. The post office stamps letters with a new efficiency, knowing that Saturday deliveries will be lighter, predictable. Even the church bells seem to chime in a more regular pattern, no longer competing with the chaotic overlap of half-day commerce and Sabbath observance. The weekend isn't just a personal luxury anymore. It's a synchronized rhythm, a national heartbeat that pulses through towns and cities, factories and farms, across class lines and regional differences. You feel it in the way your neighbours all seem to mow their lawns on Saturday morning, in the way families plan outings for Sunday afternoon, in the way shops stock their shelves with the expectation of a 2-day lull. The weekend has become infrastructure. Mainstream historical accounts from the late 1930s and 1940s show how the 48-hour weekend gradually standardized across Britain and much of the industrialized world. It wasn't a single law or decree, but a convergence of labour agreements, corporate policies, and cultural expectations. The 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act in the United States, which established the 40-hour workweek for many industries, had a ripple effect across the Atlantic. In Britain, the gradual adoption of the weekend was cemented by post-war reconstruction efforts that prioritised worker well-being as a component of national recovery. Trade unions, employers, and government agencies began to speak a common language. The weekend wasn't a concession. It was a cornerstone of a stable, productive society. You can feel that consensus in the way your employer hands out the new work schedule, printed neatly on a single sheet of paper, with Saturday and Sunday clearly marked in bold. No asterisks, no conditions, just rest, guarantee. And here's the quirky fringe detail that quietly anchors this new national rhythm to your everyday life. As the weekend standardized, so did the rituals that filled it. In the late 1930s, the BBC began broadcasting a weekend time signal. A gentle melodic chime aired at 9 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday mornings, designed to help families synchronize their leisure. It wasn't a call to work like the factory whistle. It was an invitation to begin the day together, a sonic bookmark that said, "Now we rest." Some households even developed the habit of gathering around the wireless at that exact moment, sharing a cup of tea as the chimes echoed through the parlour. It was a whimsical, almost poetic way to turn timekeeping into community. Historians still argue whether the weekend time signal was a genuine effort to foster national cohesion, or just a clever bit of programming to boost radio listenership during idle hours. Either way, it reveals how deeply the standardized weekend seeped into the cultural fabric, turning abstract time into shared experience. You step outside on a Saturday morning, and the street feels like a choreographed dance. Mr. Henderson is washing his car with methodical care, the same time he does every week. The Miller family is heading to the park, their picnic basket balanced between them, their steps unhurried. Children ride bicycles in loose, looping patterns, their laughter light and free, unburdened by the knowledge that they'll be back at school or work tomorrow. There's a predictability to it, all that feels almost comforting. You don't have to wonder what anyone is doing, because everyone is doing the same thing, resting in their own way on their own terms, but within a shared framework. The weekend has become a social contract, written not in law but in habit. But standardization isn't uniformity, and you feel the subtle variations within the rhythm. Some families use Saturday for chores and errands, saving Sunday for true rest. Others reverse the pattern, tackling tasks on Sunday to keep Saturday purely for leisure. Some prefer quiet afternoons at home. Others seek out community events, church gatherings, or gentle excursions. The weekend structure provides the container, but the content remains personal, flexible, human. You notice this in the way your own routine has evolved. You've learned that Saturday morning is best for practical tasks, while Sunday afternoon is for reading or walking. You've discovered that a short nap on Saturday can make Sunday feel longer, richer. The standardized weekend doesn't dictate how you spend your time. It simply ensures you have the time to spend. Mainstream sociological studies from the era begin to document something fascinating. As the weekend became a national norm, it started to shape identity itself. Workers no longer defined themselves solely by their labour. They began to speak of themselves as gardeners, as readers, as amateur photographers, as Sunday painters. Leisure wasn't just a break from work. It was a space for self-discovery, for hobbies, for the cultivation of interests that had no economic value but immense personal meaning. You feel that shift in your own life. You've started keeping a small journal of birds you spot on your walks. You've learned to knit You've discovered a love for historical novels that you never had time for before. The weekend isn't just rest, it's room to grow. The psychological impact is profound. For generations, time was a resource to be managed, optimized, exhausted. Now, time is a gift to be received, savored, shared. You notice the way your mind has changed. You don't clock watch on Friday afternoon. You don't dread Sunday evening with the same visceral anxiety. The weekend has created a buffer, a psychological safe zone, that allows you to approach work with a different mindset. It's not that labour has become easier, it's that you have a guaranteed reprieve, a light at the end of the tunnel that isn't just a distant promise but a weekly reality. You can feel that security in the way your shoulders stay relaxed. Even on a busy Thursday, you know what's coming, and that knowledge changes everything. But the standardized weekend isn't without its tensions. You feel them in the way some industries still resist the 40-hour norm, in the way shift workers struggle to find a rhythm that fits the national pattern, in the way women, often still responsible for domestic labour, find their weekends filled with chores rather than rest. The weekend, for all its promise, isn't equally accessible to all. Yet its very existence as an ideal creates pressure for improvement, a benchmark against which fairness can be measured. You notice this in the way labour organisers begin to talk not just about hours, but about the quality of those hours. The weekend becomes a rallying point, a symbol of what work-life balance could look like if given the chance to flourish. As the afternoon wears on, you find yourself at the park, not because you planned it, but because it's Saturday and that's what people do. You walk the same paths you've walked for years, but they feel different now. Not because the landscape has changed, but because your relationship to time has. You're not rushing to fit in a walk before the half-day ends. You're not bracing for the return to work. You're simply walking, for the sake of walking, for the pleasure of movement, for the quiet joy of being outside without an agenda. The park is fuller than it used to be, but not crowded. Everyone moves at their own pace, within the shared rhythm of the weekend. It's a beautiful paradox, standardization that enables individuality. You sit on a bench and watch the world go by. A couple shares a sandwich, talking in low, comfortable tones. An elderly man feeds the ducks, his movements slow and deliberate. Children chase a ball, their laughter ringing clear and bright. The scene is ordinary, even boring, by the standards of a previous century that valued drama, exertion, constant productivity. And yet, in its ordinariness, there's a kind of magic. A reminder that life isn't just about what we produce, but about how we live. The weekend has given you permission to value the latter. As evening approaches, the light softens, casting long golden shadows across the grass. Families begin to head home, not in a rush, but with the gentle momentum of a day well spent. You walk back through the quieting streets, your steps slow, your mind calm. The weekend isn't over yet. Sunday still awaits, with its own rhythm, its own possibilities. But for now, you carry the peace of Saturday with you, a quiet confidence that tomorrow will be more of the same. Time given, not taken. Rest guaranteed, not earned. You open your door, step inside, and let the quiet of home wrap around you. The week will come again, with its noise and its demands. But for now, for this moment, you are here. You are resting, you are living. And that, in the end, is the revolution the weekend promised. A quiet, boring, glorious chance to simply be. You close your eyes, and the line between then and now blurs. The heavy wool of a Victorian Sunday best fades into the soft cotton of modern loungewear. The ticking mahogany long-case clock dissolves into the gentle hum of a refrigerator, the ping of a smartphone charging, the low murmur of a streaming service waiting for you to press play. The world has moved on, but the skeleton remains. That carefully constructed, meticulously policed, sometimes stiflingly boring Victorian rest day has quietly mutated into the weekend you know today. It's no longer a moral imperative. It's not a test of piety or a bargaining chip against St. Monday's chaos. It's just yours. A 48-hour canvas where boredom isn't a curse, but a feature. You think about how strange that word sounds now. Boring. We spend so much energy trying to avoid it, curating our weekends with packed itineraries, adventurous getaways, and screen-fueled dopamine hits. But strip away the modern noise, and you'll find the Victorian blueprint underneath. The Saturday half-holiday, the dry Sunday, the park walks, the slow roasts, the quiet reading. They weren't just historical footnotes. They were the architectural plans for modern leisure. Mainstream cultural studies show that the post-war era didn't invent the weekend. It commercialized it. The mid-20th century saw the rise of suburbanization, consumer credit, and the leisure industry, all of which transformed the Victorian ideal of quiet improvement into a marketplace of hobbies, DIY projects, and planned relaxation. Yet the core rhythm remains unchanged. Work hard, step away, recharge. The tools have shifted from slate tablets and excursion trains to pottery wheels, streaming documentaries, and weekend brunch. But the psychological need for unstructured time hasn't budged an inch. And here's a quirky fringe detail that ties the Victorian parlour directly to your modern coffee table. In the 1950s, as suburban living exploded, a wave of hobbyist manuals flooded bookstores, explicitly framing weekend boredom as a creative opportunity. But dig into the archives of early 20th century craft society, and you'll find they were already publishing nearly identical pamphlets. How to Fill the Sunday Void with Whittling, The Art of Weekend Card Cataloguing, A Guide to Quiet Fern Pressing. The Victorians didn't just preach stillness, they weaponized it against idleness, offering quiet, tactile hobbies as the proper outlet for restless hands. Some of these early guides included bizarrely specific projects, like constructing a functional parlour telegraph from scrap wire, or cultivating a miniature moss garden in a broken teacup. Historians still argue whether these hobby pamphlets were genuine attempts at skill building, or just early marketing tools disguised as moral guidance, designed to keep the newly leisured working class occupied with domestic consumption. Either way, they planted the seeds for the modern maker movement, proving that the urge to tinker, create, and quietly pass the time isn't new. It's just been repackaged. You notice the evolution in your own habits. The Victorian Sunday roast becomes your weekend meal prep, a slower, more intentional way to feed yourself for the days ahead. The silent museum visits transform into late-night podcast deep dives or quiet scrolling through digital archives. The rhythmic park walks become weekend hikes, dog strolls, or just pacing your living room while thinking. The preparation aspect is especially telling. The Victorians used Sunday not just for rest, but for readiness, mending clothes, polishing boots, planning the week, settling the mind. You do the same. Maybe you lay out your clothes on Sunday night. Maybe you write a quick to-do list. Maybe you just sit for 20 minutes with a cup of tea, mentally bracing for Monday. It's a ritual of transition, a psychological airlock between the freedom of the weekend and the demands of the work week. The Victorians understood something modern productivity culture often forgets. Rest isn't the opposite of preparation. It's its foundation. The legacy of that boring stillness is everywhere, even when we don't recognize it. Think about the modern obsession with unplugging. We buy analog journals, turn off notifications, seek out digital detox retreats. We're not inventing new ways to rest. We're just trying to reclaim the quiet the Victorians mandated for us. The difference is now it's a choice. You can opt out. You can be bored on purpose. And in doing so, you're participating in a centuries-old experiment in human pacing. The factory whistle may be gone, but the rhythm it tried to impose has been internalized. You know when to push. You know when to pause. That instinct wasn't born in a self-help book. It was forged in the soot-filled mills of the 1830s, negotiated through St. Monday's hangovers, sanctified in silent churches, and finally codified into the 48-hour rhythm we take for granted. You can almost feel the timeline collapsing. The heavy velvet curtains of a Sabbath parlor lift, and instead of darkness, you see the soft glow of a laptop screen, the warm light of a desk lamp, the quiet comfort of a couch. The rules have softened, the moralizing has faded, but the structure remains sturdy and reliable. You don't need a foreman to tell you when to rest. You don't need a Sabbatarian society to guilt you into stillness. You just need to remember that boredom isn't a void, it's a buffer, a necessary friction between the noise of production and the quiet of being. When you feel that Sunday evening slump, that gentle dread creeping in as the weekend winds down, you're not experiencing a modern flaw. You're feeling the echo of a very old rhythm. The transition from rest to work was always meant to be gradual. The Victorians built guardrails for it. Clocks, clothes, rituals, rules. You've replaced them with routines, playlists, and meal prep. The tools changed. The purpose didn't. You think about how many generations have lived within this framework. Millions of people, stretching back 200 years, have relied on these 48 hours to survive, to dream, to reset. The chaos of St. Monday was tamed not by force but by compromise. The quiet of the dry Sunday was enforced, then embraced, then liberated. The boring walks, the slow roasts, the hushed museum, the excursion trains, they weren't just distractions, they were survival strategies. Ways to keep the human spirit from grinding to dust under the weight of industrial time. And they worked. You're living proof. The weekend isn't a luxury, it's a life raft. A weekly rescue mission disguised as routine. As the light in your room shifts from afternoon gold to evening blue, you don't reach for a screen. You don't rush to fill the quiet. You just let it settle. The hum of the city outside softens. The weight of the week lifts just slightly, making room for what comes next. You breathe in, you breathe out. The Victorian parlour, the factory floor, the crowded park, the silent library. They all fold into this moment, this quiet Sunday evening, where history isn't a textbook. It's a rhythm. It's the steady, predictable pulse of a world that finally learned how to pause. Let the quiet stretch out now, longer and softer than before. The heavy mahogany clocks have finally wound down. The distant factory whistles have faded into the archives, replaced by the gentle rhythmic hum of the present moment. It wraps around you like a well-worn quilt, heavy enough to ground you, soft enough to let you sink. You don't need to plan for tomorrow. You don't need to fix anything. Just listen to the slow, steady cadence of your own breathing, matching the quiet pulse of a world that has finally learned how to rest. The soot has settled on the cobblestones of history. The chaotic noise of St. Monday has long since been negotiated into peace. All that remains is this: a cool pillow, a darkened room, and the comforting certainty that you have done enough. Your shoulders drop another inch. Your thoughts loosen their grip, drifting away like autumn leaves on a still, glassy pond. There is nowhere else you need to be, no schedule to keep, no quota to meet. Just the slow, deliberate X turning into a quiet night. Let the memories of slow roasts and park walks blur into the warmth of sleep. Let the rhythm of the weekend carry you down, deeper and softer, until the edge of waking dissolves completely into the dark. Rest is not a reward anymore. It is simply what happens when you finally let go. Close your eyes. Feel the stillness settle into your bones. The week will wait. For now, there is only peace. Let the gentle hum of the fan, or the quiet tick of time itself, guide you under. You are safe here. You are held. The long history of learning how to stop has finally brought you to this exact, perfect moment of quiet. End of script. Sweet dreams.